I'm Brian Buss, a managing director with Glass-Ratner Advisory and Capital, based in San Diego, California, and you're listening to the IP Fridays podcast.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of IP Fridays. Our names are Ken Suzanne and Rolf Claessen, and this is the podcast dedicated to intellectual property. It does not matter where you are from, in-house or private practice, novice or expert. We will help you stay up to date with current topics in the fields of trademarks, patents, design and copyright, discover useful tools, and much more.
I am Rolf Claessen, and my co-host Ken Suzanne and I are welcoming you to episode 170 of our podcast IP Fridays. We also want to wish you a happy holiday season and a successful year 2026. Today's interview guest is Brian Buss. He is a managing director of Glass-Ratner, and my co-host Ken Suzanne talks with him about evaluation of intellectual property rights and damages in infringement cases. But before we jump into the interview, I have news for you. A US startup called Operation Bluebird is trying to take over the Twitter trademarks. It has asked the USPTO to cancel Twitter wordmarks, arguing that Elon Musk's company X no longer uses them after rebrand. Led by a former Twitter trademark lawyer, Operation Bluebird also filed its own Twitter trademark application. Commentators note that X could face challenges defending the legacy trademarks if they are truly no longer in use. In parallel, the US debate on patent quality and review procedures is intensifying. The USPTO proposed controversial rule changes that would restrict the inter partes review. The proposal triggered substantial backlash with more than 11,000 public comments submitted. In the EU, a major trademark reform will take effect on 1st of January 2026. It aims to simplify procedures, recognize new types of marks including hologram, multimedia and motion marks, and make fees more SME-friendly. Opposition procedures will be further harmonized across the EU, including mandatory cooling-off period, so brand owners should adjust filing and monitoring strategies accordingly. The Unified Patent Court, UPC, continues to see strong uptake, especially in Germany. In the first 18 months since the launch on 1st of June 2023, well over 900 cases were filed, with German local divisions Munich, Düsseldorf, Mannheim and Hamburg leading in patent actions. While many early cases were filed in German, English now dominates as the main language of proceedings. The court has largely met its timelines, with oral hearings typically held within 12 months of filing. China has reached a milestone in its patent system. For the first time, a country has surpassed 5 million active invention patents. The Chinese Intellectual Property Agency emphasizes a strategic shift from quantity to quality, citing growth in high-value patents and higher commercialization rates for university inventions. China has also led global PCT filings for 6 consecutive years. On 4th of December 2025, the USPTO issued new guidance on subject matter eligibility declarations. These declarations allow applicants to submit additional evidence to support patent eligibility with emerging technologies such as AI systems and medical diagnostics, aiming to reduce the risks that breakthrough inventions are excluded from protection under strict eligibility case law. In December, the European Patent Office introduced new patent quality measures. Third parties can now submit observations on published applications or granted patents via a simplified online form. These third-party observations, supported by evidence and even filed anonymously, go directly to examination teams to flag potential obstacles early. Now, let's jump into the interview with Brian Buss.
Our guest today on the IP Fridays podcast is Brian Buss. Brian is a managing director with Glass-Ratner Advisory and Capital Group and is based in San Diego, California.
Brian is a chartered financial analyst with 30 years of experience in valuations, financial analysis, corporate finance, and expert testimony around the world. Mr. Buss provides strategic advice for owners of intellectual property portfolios, transaction support, and due diligence for acquisitions, licensing, divestiture, and partnership transactions. He also has experience in providing expert testimony regarding economic damages, valuation and IP asset apportionment in civil litigation, and valuations of trademarks, patents, copyrights, brand assets, trade secrets, technology assets, and intangibles. During his career, Mr. Buss has provided valuation opinions and transaction advisory services for clients across the United States and overseas, and expert testimony in federal court, state courts, and arbitration proceedings. As an expert, Mr. Buss has provided over 100 expert opinions, sat for over 50 depositions, and testified in trial and arbitration proceedings 15 times. At the International Trademark Association, Brian currently serves as the chair of the Commercialization of IP Committee, is an instructor in the Finance Certificate Program, and served on the Presidential Task Force on Intellectual Property Reporting for Brands. Brian holds an MBA from San Diego State University and a bachelor's degree in biology and economics from Claremont McKenna College. Welcome, Brian, to the IP Fridays podcast.
Hey, thank you, Ken, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Excellent, Brian. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background?
I mean, you did an extremely thorough job of reading my bio there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. But the basic thing is, I mean, my profession or my day job is to, measure and detect and identify the value of intellectual properties and intangible assets. So, basically I do the financial detective work to figure out, what it's worth or what is the financial and economic impact of using a patent, a copyright, a trade secret or trademark, a brand, or, those other types of intangible assets.
Mm-hmm. And Brian, as you know, in the name of the podcast, this is IP Fridays. So we have a knowledgeable audience, but when we're talking about IP, what are you referring to?
Yeah, I guess I'm really talking about any intangible asset that could be used by a business to assist in the generation of economic benefits. So as we've kind of listed some of them, intangible assets can be those formal intellectual property rights like patents, trademarks, and copyrights, as well as combinations of rights, things like brands, technology portfolios, internet and social media assets, or even just kind of know-how. So any of those intangible assets. So I think as we go forward, I imagine we'll say IP quite a bit.
Yes.
And, for me, IP is all of those.
Mm-hmm.
I also mentioned that term economic benefits, so I'm probably jumping ahead here. But when I say economic benefits, I'm referring to any measure of financial performance. And this could be additional sales, it could be profits, earnings, or cash flows. IP can contribute to financial performance in different ways. And so part of the financial detective work that my team and I do is we identify and measure what economic benefits are being achieved from using IP.
Mm-hmm. Brian, let's talk about the circumstances which lead to having a valuation. Why would a business want to value IP, and how might they do it?
Sure. I mean, IP assets are often the most valuable, but least measured resource at a company. So my team and I, we recently did a little study of middle market public companies, and we found a substantial value gap between the market value of these companies and the value of the assets reported on their balance sheet. In other words, the companies were worth more than the number or the amount of assets that they reported on their financial reports. So most of this value gap reflects the contribution and value of that company's IP and intangible assets. We studied smaller public companies, but that gap gets even bigger as you get up to larger, higher market cap companies. So in other words, some of the most valuable, important assets at most businesses is their IP. And often that's not necessarily reported or automatically calculated in their accounting and financial reports.
Mm-hmm.
But for why a company would want to value the IP, I think equally important, we know that a company's IP drives opportunities and value for those businesses. So companies spend a lot of money to obtain, protect, and enforce their IP rights. However, most companies don't really invest in processes and procedures to identify the economic value that those assets provide. So they don't know how IP contributes to financial performance. They don't really have a return on investment or ROI measure for their investment in their most important assets.
Mm-hmm.
I think the value of valuing IP is the ability to create a better return on the investment that companies make in their IP assets. We know IP can drive value. What IP valuation is really getting more knowledge about the how to measure what value those IP investments are creating.
Mm-hmm. Now, Brian, you've been in the valuation business for IP for a good number of years. Can you give me a little bit of an idea of some circumstances or examples where a company was seeking to get their IP evaluated and tell us a little bit about the process?
Sure. The situations are almost always different every time someone asks about valuing their IP.
Mm-hmm.
I've encountered situations where just management of the business wants to have a better understanding of what drives their overall financial performance. There's situations where there's an internal dispute within management about where they should be investing their assets and resources, right? How do they allocate limited resources? Should it be investing in technology or in marketing and brand activities? There's valuation often comes up when there's the potential for an external event, like the opportunity to acquire another business, or maybe the company has received an offer to be acquired. There can be opportunities to franchise or partner or enter into a license agreement. All of those decisions are really value-driven decisions, and understanding the value of your IP enables companies to make more efficient and stronger decisions when those external events come up.
Mm-hmm.
I've also used valuation as a tool to help companies understand how to set their pricing strategy, or how are they going to charge for their products or services. Once again, IP is really all about how do you make your product or service exclusive. And if you understand how the IP is contributing to financial performance, you can use that knowledge to better set the price for the products or services that you're selling.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, did that kind of answer your question? I mean,
this is helpful.
The reasons why the value, I think, are so varied that it's really kind of hard to give just a few specific examples. But, I think you'll probably hear me say this a few times when I think valuation is knowledge and knowledge is power.
Yeah. Do you find that you're getting a lot of the valuation requests from companies here in the U.S. or from overseas, or is it a combination of both?
Because I am based in the U.S., I interact with U.S. companies more, but I know that, there through both the work I'm doing with INTA, the International Trademark Association, and my company has offices in Canada and Mexico. There's a growing interest around the world. It's the same issue, right? Around the world, companies realize that it's their proprietary assets, their IP, that drives their financial performance, and therefore those proprietary assets are their most valuable asset. But it becomes a question of how do we measure the value of our proprietary assets, and how do we know which ones that we've invested in are driving financial performance. So in brief, to kind of get back to your question, most of my work has been in the U.S. I have worked for companies around the world, and I think it's a growing issue around the world. And the good thing is, valuation, the art and science of valuation, is the same regardless of language, jurisdiction, country, or geography.
Brian, let's talk about the mechanics, not too much in detail, but just enough to give our listeners a flavor of valuation. How exactly would a business value its IP?
Well, I think there's kind of two dimensions at a high level that drive IP valuation. There's the standard and accepted methodologies, and anyone who's heard or seen or read anything about valuation will have heard about the cost approach, the income approach, and the market approach. And of course, if you're going to value IP, you want to consider the cost approach, the income approach, and the market approach. So those are three approaches. The cost approach basically is looking at what would be the investment required to replace an asset or replicate an asset. The market approach is looking at determining value based on what others in a similar market have paid to acquire similar assets. It's all of kind of the study of comparables. And the income approach is really quantifying and measuring and calculating the present value of future benefits that will be accrued from use of that asset. Now, so those are the three approaches, but really kind of when we're valuing IP, we have to kind of think about three dimensions of the analysis. So the methodologies are cost, income, and market, but the how really kind of comes down to considering and evaluating financial, behavioral, and legal factors. So for those three factors, for the financial factors, we're thinking about financial performance, financial ratios, performance over time, the amount of invested in the past, the amount of expected future benefits in the future. So it's all the analytical toolkit that focuses on the numbers, the financial reports, the expected economic benefits. The second factor, the behavioral factors, well, that's all those factors that you think about, like what drives demand for that product or service. What and how do customers learn about or become familiar with a product? What do customers remember about that brand or that company? Do they have positive or negative feelings towards the companies? What elements or what components of a product attract interest? So those are all behavioral factors. And, for every situation, there can be different behavioral factors. The legal factors that you have to consider, because IP is a legal right, we need to understand the registration and enforcement history of the subject asset. And I say subject asset, I mean, are we valuing a patent or a portfolio of patents or a portfolio of trademarks or copyrights? So, what is the registration and enforcement history? What other assets, intellectual property assets, are owned and used by the company? And do other competitors or comparable companies have similar assets? So you're really kind of looking at the legal landscape around IP related to the individual IP asset that you're asked to value. So, we have to think about the three methodologies: cost, income, and market. And we have to consider the three factors: financial, behavioral, and legal.
Yes. Now, Brian, back to the how. The analyses you describe appear to require a lot of information. What can a company do today to ensure that it's collecting the data needed to understand the value of its IP?
I think it sounds kind of old, but having good books and records, right? You have to have good bookkeeping and financial systems. We're going to ask for financial reports. We're going to ask to see sales and cost data for products that use the IP that we're valuing. In addition to that, the accounting and financial records. We're also going to want to, a company should have a business plan or a budget or a projection of its future expected performance. I know business plans everyone says you should have one, and everyone creates one and then puts it in a drawer and never looks at it again. But those business plans are important to identify what a company thinks, how they will use their IP to generate future sales and profits. And, the plan speaks a lot to what a company expects to achieve going forward. So I know they can be a pain to create, but business plans and budgets and projections are key to helping understand and measure the value of the company and its IP. Beyond those financial records, we're going to be looking at, what kind of marketing is the company doing? Where are they marketing? What elements or what features of their products are they marketing and promoting? We want to get and look at website and social media analytics. So this means things like getting your website traffic data from Google Analytics, understanding, who's coming to your web pages or your social media pages, who's reacting with your posts. Everybody does business in some way on the web and in social media, and all of that activity creates a lot of data, and that data, it becomes informative. And if a company isn't collecting that data, tracking that data, managing that data, and reviewing that data, they're missing out on a lot of useful and valuable information. And we're going to look to make sure that we understand what the company's IP portfolio is. So, most businesses work with outside counsel to both develop and manage their IP portfolio. And so if you're going to value IP, the valuation expert should ask, hey, we want to see, your IP portfolio, the registrations, the renewals, your enforcement activities. Have you been in litigation? That kind of information about the IP portfolio. So, those are kind of 6 ingredients. Financials, and future financials, marketing, website, and IP portfolio.
Yeah, I know you just touched upon it, but I want to dig a little deeper, and that is internet and social media assets. What types of things do you evaluate? And tell me about the process. It's fascinating.
Like I said, for just about every business out there all over the world, the internet and social media is an increasing component of their marketing activities and a key element of their brand. It's rare that you would come across a business these days that doesn't use or rely somehow on a website or e-commerce or electronic marketplaces or social media to promote, market, sell, or even distribute products. Even service providers, professional services firms rely on their websites, customer review sites, mapping sites where, people search into different locations. And if your business doesn't come up in the mapping service, you're missing out on opportunities.
Yeah.
Those businesses rely on social media to raise awareness, reach customers, manage their brand and people's perception of their company. So all of that activity is electronic and it all creates data. So we want to kind of, look at all of that data when we can to inform our decisions on valuing any assets that relate to that. And even if you're valuing a patent, you would think, hey, that's a technology driven valuation. But the patent covers features or components of a product. And we want to look and see if those features and components are being talked about on social media. Are they being marketed and emphasized in the company's marketing activities? Are people reacting to marketing that focuses on the features protected by the patent, or are they ignoring those features? So, even valuations of technology IP are going to be informed by the website and social media data, if that helps answer your question.
Yeah, it does. One thing which comes to mind is domain names. Walk me through, if I had a domain name and I wanted to sell it, what would be some of the things you would be asking me about my domain name as part of the due diligence to get this domain name sold?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And, for domain names, it's a little bit of kind of your virtual real estate, right? It's your address. So we want to know if people are using that address. So we're going to need to look at your website analytics. Anybody who has a website can turn on and get analytics from their ISP, their website provider, from Google and other services. And that analytics is telling you about, what traffic is coming to your site, where that traffic is coming from. If the traffic is using search, are they searching for terms that are related to your domain name, or are they simply typing your domain name into their browser? There's some services that even can track and estimate how often your domain name has been bookmarked. So all of those are key features to understand. Is it the domain name that's attracting traffic or contributing to getting people onto your site? Or is it other elements of your marketing that are getting people to your site and then enabling them to interact with your business through the website or social media? So, a domain name can be a valuable asset when people know that address and they use that address to find your business.
Very useful information, Brian. We're coming to a close. What final thoughts do you have for our audience today?
We touched on this, but I think I have to say it again. I mean, IP assets can and should be measured and valued. While the effort to gather and manage the information needed to support a solid IP valuation requires some investment of time and energy and effort, there's a positive ROI on this information collection investment. Through the investment in gathering the information needed for evaluation, I believe the business gains greater awareness of its most valuable assets, obtains the information needed to support better strategic decisions, and has the information available needed to support growth and expansion opportunities. I think IP valuation is really a virtuous cycle of information gathering, analysis, further understanding, and then decision making and creation of additional resources to support further development. So, we kind of said it before, knowledge is power, and knowledge of the value of your IP is the power to increase the profitability and value of your business. So, I kind of see IP valuation as a key element of the management toolkit.
Brian, well said. And thank you so much for taking time today to be on the IP Fridays podcast.
Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate the opportunity.
That's it for this episode. If you liked what you heard, please show us your love by visiting ipfridays.com/love and tweet a link to this show. We would be so grateful if you would do that. It would help us out to get the word out. Also, please subscribe to our podcast at ipfridays.com or on iTunes or Stitcher.com. If you have a question or want to be featured in one of the upcoming episodes, please send us your feedback at ipfridays.com/feedback. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes. You can go to ipfridays.com/iTunes and it will take you right to the correct page on iTunes. If you want to get mentioned on this podcast or even have comments within the next episode, please leave us your voicemail at ipfridays.com/voicemail. You have been listening to an episode of IP Fridays. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by their respective law firms. None of the content should be considered legal advice. The IP Fridays podcast should not be construed as legal advice or legal opinion on any specific facts or circumstances. The contents of this podcast are intended for general informational purposes only, and you are urged to consult your own lawyer on any specific legal questions. As always, consult a lawyer or patent or trademark attorney. Copyright 2014, all rights reserved.